Before we start a new basket, I gotta show you the old one. Prototype number 1 was made from a wire-frame letter holder. It was made from a wire-frame letter holder.
Today, Junior!
Why can I not say that? Anyway, held on with some super simple hardware. Reinforced the bottom with an old beer sign. Speaking of which, I made a little beverage holder out of some old HVAC pipe. But there's 2 problems with this basket. Number 1, it's too big. Every time we'd go on a bike ride, stuff would rattle around in there. And because of that, leads to problem number 2. It's too weak. We need an upgrade. So here's the basic plan. Nice big beefy metal frame with a metal grate made from this. I don't know if the red circle faded out or fell off, but it's an easy fix. Just need some spray paint in a cup, a sign painting brush, and a little confidence. So when making the blueprints for this thing, I designed it around this really specific cooler that I had. That way it's a super snug fit and it's not shaking around the whole time. Before we start cutting on this thing, I gotta point something out. These lines are offset on purpose to account for the thickness of the material. I'm also drilling some holes in those tight corners to give it some relief during the folding process. So scoring. We're gonna remove like a little less than half the material. To do this, we're gonna be using an angle grinder with like a really thin blade. We'll be using a really thin blade on there. I clamped down a piece of scrap wood for 2 reasons. 1, keeps the sign nice and stabilized while you're cutting it, and 2, provides a really good guide for those nice long straight lines. Shorter lines, not as tricky, you can freehand that. For pieces that need to be removed, I never cut all the way through the material. If you do that, you risk burning the front image, totally ruining the project. I just score them and bend them out for a cleaner result. Now we're gonna file all these score lines that are gonna be folded into more of like a V shape. That way when we fold it all together, we have a nice clean 90 degree. And the metal's not fighting itself. I'm gonna clean up the inside of this basket using wire brushes. Now I've done this thing in the past where I've made some really cool textures with it, but I've never done it on something this big. So I clamped down the scrap wood and I'm gonna do a nice even line down there. So we're gonna freehand some nice straight lines, just making sure that the oh f it. Easy part? Just mark off how much you need and cut it off. To make cutting easier, just listen to some bad 80s metal. The tricky part is figuring out where this needs to go and marking them so that way they're nice and even on both sides. And now the hard part.
Yeah.
A tap is used to put threads into a hole, so that way you can bolt into it. A die, however, turns any rod into essentially a screw. In this case,
I expect you to die.
when doing this, go slow, but use a lot of pressure. Also use a lot of oil. You always want to do like 2 full turns forward and then like a quarter turn back. And everything's going smooth until... Get your socket wrench out, find a deep socket that fits the die, and crank it. Once it's all done and you got the depth that you want, back off the die and a nut should just screw on there easy peasy. Well, while that's drying, you can actually bend this box just using like the end of your bench. But honestly, getting some hand sammers make it so much more controlled and so much more precise. Now that the grate's dry, we're actually going to put nuts and washers on it before we actually install it to the sign. Once the grate's fed through the holes, then we'll add on the outside hardware. Why 2 nuts?
Pudding!
Well, 1, the inside nut helps me adjust the sheet metal to get that perfect straight angle. The other nice thing too is I can actually tighten those nuts into each other, making this thing super strong and super sturdy. And on that note, I'm attaching the sides to the bottom. This thing is just absolutely yoked. With just a couple holes, I was able to use the old hardware to mount this back onto the bike. The big test is, does it fit the cooler? With this being smaller, what else does it fit?
You're getting too old for this shit.
So that's a wrap for this basket. That's actually part one of all these little mini projects to turn this rad vintage muscle bike into the perfect bike. It's awesome, but it's not perfect. Yet. Next thing to tackle is gonna be the seat. So to make a new banana seat, I'm gonna take a chewed up skateboard and some old parts. One of my favorite makers, Laura Comp, did this years ago.
What's up, Laura? I know you got a new house. I hope it's delightful.
But I'm gonna yes and her design by adding some shocks that you can make by just going to the hardware store. Once we have all these small projects done, I'm gonna probably compile it to like one big video at the very end. In the meantime, button, bell, thumb, and see you soon.